Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. It's all about getting those like super cinematic drone shots with your DJI Avata2.
Nice.
But we're not talking about just any location.
Yeah.
We're talking about Switzerland.
Oh, yeah.
Soaring mountains, crystal clear lakes, those picturesque villages. I mean, come on. It's a dream, right?
It is a drone pilot's dream, for sure.
And you've sent over a few expert YouTube tutorials, and we're going to kind of like break those down.
Great.
And make sure that you are ready and set to capture some really epic footage.
Awesome. Yeah, it's smart to, tap into the knowledge of different experts.
For sure.
Each one brings their own unique perspective, and you can really learn a lot by combining those approaches.
Absolutely, and that's where we come in. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to spend hours watching these videos. We've already done that for you.
Right.
So let's jump right into it.
Yep.
One thing that really stood out to me from the drone creative was this whole auto record on takeoff setting.
Yeah.
And, we've all been there. You land after an amazing flight, and your heart sinks because you realize you forgot to hit record.
Oh, for sure. I think every drone pilot has experienced that moment of panic at least once.
At least once.
But with auto record on takeoff, the moment your Avata2 leaves the ground, it's capturing footage. No more missed shots of those epic Swiss Alps.
Oh, what a relief.
You can just focus on flying and framing those incredible landscapes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, another cool feature that they mentioned is this real view picture-in-picture.
Yeah.
So you can see your surroundings without taking off the goggles.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
It's a fantastic feature for situational awareness. But here's the thing. By default, it only shows your real-world surroundings.
Okay.
To make it truly useful, enable the setting that adds your drone's camera feed to the goggles view.
Got it.
That way you can keep an eye on your composition and framing without taking your eyes off the real world.
Yeah.
It's like having a live preview of your shot while still being fully present in your environment.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay. One thing that I see popping up in all these tutorials are the importance of ND filters.
Yes.
I'll be honest. This is an area where I always get a little lost.
I can see why ND filters are essential for creating that cinematic look, but the science behind them can be a bit confusing.
Yes.
Think of them like sunglasses for your drone's camera.
Okay.
They control the amount of light hitting the sensor. Why is this important for the cinematic look? Because ND filters allow you to use slower shutter speeds.
Okay.
This creates that beautiful motion blur that we associate with professional filmmaking.
Okay, so slower shutter speeds, more blur, more cinematic.
Exactly, and especially in Switzerland where you have that bright, crisp sunlight reflecting off the snow and lakes, ND filters will be your best friend.
Got it. I'm adding those to my Switzerland packing list.
For sure.
For sure. Now, another debate that I keep seeing is this whole automatic versus manual camera settings, drone supremacy, talks about this hybrid approach, which sounds really intriguing.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
It's a great middle ground, especially if you're looking for that balance between creative control and ease of use.
Yeah.
With this hybrid approach, you lock your shutter speed and white balance for consistency throughout your footage.
Okay.
This is crucial for maintaining a cohesive look and feel, but you let the ISO adjust automatically within a set range.
So why the different approaches for those settings?
Good question. You want that shutter speed locked to achieve that specific cinematic blur, and locking the white balance ensures that the colors in your footage remain consistent regardless of the changing light conditions throughout the day. But with ISO, a bit of flexibility can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Light can change drastically, especially when you're flying through valleys or around mountains in Switzerland.
Oh, for sure. So that automatic ISO adjustment helps compensate for those shifts in light.
Exactly. Make sure your footage is properly exposed even when the lighting conditions are unpredictable. Okay. You get the consistency of locked shutter speed and white balance with the adaptability of automatic ISO.
That's brilliant. Now, Heberdale had this really interesting tip about tilting the drone's camera for different effects.
Yes.
Break that down.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding how the angle of your camera impacts the feel of your footage.
Okay.
A lower tilt angle, somewhere between 0 and 15 degrees, will give you these beautifully smooth and slow-paced shots. Perfect for capturing the vastness and grandeur of the Swiss landscapes.
Okay, so low angle equals majestic sweeping feel. Got it.
Right. But if you're going for a more dynamic and fast-paced feel, You want to increase that tilt angle.
Okay.
Imagine tilting the camera up to 30 degrees or even higher. It's all about creating a sense of movement and speed.
I can see how that would work.
Yeah.
Like if you're flying down a mountainside or through a narrow gorge, that higher angle would really amp up the drama.
Exactly. It brings the viewer right into the action. And it's particularly effective when you combine it with your drone's movement.
Now, another thing that Hubert Ale mentioned is this choice between using the motion controller and the traditional radio controller.
Yep.
Now, isn't the motion controller that thing where you control the drone by moving your hand?
Yeah.
It sounds super futuristic.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it offers some unique advantages, especially for certain types of shots. The motion controller is incredibly intuitive and gives you this really fine-grained control over the drone's movements.
So when would you use the motion controller versus the radio controller?
Think about those scenes where you need to navigate tight spaces with a lot of precision, like flying through a dense forest or around delicate structures.
Okay, so it's like having this extra level of finesse and control.
Exactly. But the radio controller is still the go-to for experienced pilots who want the most speed and agility. It gives you that extra responsiveness for maneuvers like dives and fast-paced chases.
So it's all about choosing the right tool for the job, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes drone cinematography so exciting. You have all these different tools and techniques at your disposal. It's all about experimenting and finding what works best for your creative vision.
You know, I'm already feeling so much more prepared to tackle this Switzerland drone project.
That's what we love to hear. But we've only just scratched the surface.
I know.
There's so much more to dive into.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
You got it. Before we get to that, let's take a moment to recap some of the key settings you should adjust on your Avata2 before your next flight. It's always good to have a checklist, right?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. Let's start with resolution. Make sure you're shooting in 4K at 60 frames per second.
Okay.
This will give you the highest quality footage and that smooth cinematic look we've been talking about.
Okay, 4K, 60 fps. Check. What about color profiles?
Yes.
I've heard those can make a big difference in post-production.
You heard right. Switch to the D-Log M color profile. Think of it like capturing a wider range of tones and colors. It gives you more flexibility when you're editing and color grading your footage later on.
So it's kind of like giving yourself more room to play around with the look and feel of the final product.
Exactly. It preserves more detail in the highlights and shadows, which is especially important in Switzerland, where you have those bright, snowy peaks and deep, shadowy valleys.
Makes sense. Okay, we talked about ND filters earlier, but can you give us some specifics? Which one should our listener pack for those bright Swiss conditions?
I'd recommend starting with an ND32 filter, as Switzerland gets a lot of sunlight, especially at higher altitudes, and the ND32 will help you control that light for optimal exposure. It's like having the perfect pair of sunglasses for your drone.
And again, that helps with getting that slower shutter speed for the cinematic blur, right?
You got it. Now remember those manual camera settings we talked about for that hybrid approach? Let's break those down again.
Please do. I'm ready to take notes.
All right, for shutter speed, set it to double your frame rate. Since we're shooting at 60 frames per second, you want a shutter speed of 1120th of a second. This will give you that beautiful natural motion blur.
Okay, 1120th for that dreamy look. Got it.
Next up is ISO. Start with the lowest ISO possible, ideally 100. This will give you the cleanest image with the least amount of grain or noise. You can bump it up if you need to, but keep it as low as you can for the best quality.
So low ISO equals clean, crisp footage.
Exactly. And finally, for white balance, you can usually trust the auto setting. It does a pretty good job of adjusting to the different lighting conditions you'll encounter.
Auto white balance, got it.
Yeah.
Any other must-know settings or features that we should be aware of?
Oh, absolutely. Don't forget about the center point setting. It places a small X in the center of your screen, which is incredibly helpful for lining up those epic shots, especially when you're flying through narrow spaces or around obstacles.
Like those stunning Swiss gorges and those charming narrow streets in the villages.
Exactly. And speaking of composition, grid lines are your friend. Experiment with different grid layouts. They can be really helpful for framing your shots and achieving that visual balance.
It's like having those guidelines that artists use to make sure everything is in proportion, right?
It's a similar concept. They help you visualize the rule of thirds and other compositional techniques. Remember, settings are important, but they're only part of the equation.
That's right. We have all these tools and knowledge now, but it's up to us to get creative with them.
And that brings us to our final thought-provoking question. We've covered all these amazing settings and features, but what about the actual flight path and composition?
This is where the real magic happens, right?
Absolutely. How can our listener use their knowledge of the Swiss landscape to capture truly unique and memorable drone shots? How can they elevate their footage from technically sound to visually captivating?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. We have the technical stuff down, but how do we bring those Swiss landscapes to life? How do we move beyond those postcard shots and create something truly unique?
It's all about using your drone to tell a story, to reveal the landscape in a way that surprises and captivates the viewer. Think about those iconic Swiss landmarks, the Matterhorn, the Jungfraujoch, Lake Lucerne. We've all seen the standard shots, but how can you approach them from a fresh perspective?
I love that idea. It's like finding those hidden gems, those unexpected angles that make people go, wow, I've never seen it like that before.
Exactly. Instead of just showcasing the Matterhorn straight on, imagine flying your Avata2 through a dense pine forest using those motion controller skills we talked about. And then as you emerge from the trees, the Matterhorn slowly reveals itself in all its glory.
Oh, I can picture that shot. It would be so dramatic, like the mountain is unveiling itself just for you. That element of surprise, the way the drone weaves through the environment, it creates a completely different experience.
Right. It's all about using movement and composition to create a sense of wonder and discovery. Or think about those charming Swiss chalets nestled in the valleys. Instead of a static aerial shot, you could use a reveal technique. Start with a close-up on a detail of the chalet, maybe a flower box overflowing with geraniums, or a beautifully carved wooden balcony.
So you're drawing the viewer in with that detail, making them curious about what else is there.
Exactly. And then you slowly pull back to reveal the entire chalet and the breathtaking scenery that surrounds it. It's like you're telling a story, building anticipation and then delivering that wow moment.
It's amazing how those small shifts in perspective and technique can completely transform a shot.
It really is. Remember, Switzerland has such a diverse landscape, from those rugged mountain peaks to the rolling hills, the vineyards, the crystal clear lakes. Let the terrain inspire you. Experiment with different flight paths, different camera angles, and different speeds.
It's like we've unlocked this whole new world of creative possibilities. I'm feeling so inspired to get out there and start flying.
That's the spirit. Remember, knowledge is power, but it's the application of that knowledge that truly unlocks your creative potential. So go forth, experiment, push your boundaries, and most importantly, have fun.
This deep dive has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and for giving us the tools to create some truly cinematic drone footage in Switzerland.
It's been my pleasure. I can't wait to see the amazing footage you capture. Who knows, maybe you'll inspire us with your unique vision and innovative techniques. Happy flying!